Hello, here is a specimen showing two segments of large bowel, and this is the mucosal surface and here is the serosal surface. And the main abnormality can be seen in the mucosal surface. So let's take a closer look. What we can see here are multiple broad, quite shallow appearing ulcers. And in this area, actually this entire area is pretty much ulcerated, but there are some residual islands of mucosa here. The mucosa in these areas looks somewhat abnormal. In fact, they look a little bit polypoid, and this is because of the regenerative changes in the mucosa. So these are known as pseudopolyps. So this appearance, showing the large, shallow, broad ulcers and regenerative pseudopolyps, is quite classical for ulcerative colitis. Ulcerative colitis is one of the two major types of inflammatory bowel disease, the other one being Crohn's disease. It is important to examine the pseudopolyps or any polypoid areas that appear a little bit different from the other areas because there is a significant risk of developing malignancy, adenocarcinoma, in ulcerative colitis, especially in long-standing ulcerative colitis. Let me show you another example of ulcerative colitis. And here is another example of ulcerative colitis. In this instance, we can see the terminal ileum, the ileocecal valve, the cecum, and then the ascending colon, and this is also part of the colon. And when we turn this around, we can actually recognize that the appendix is here. Hence, that's the terminal ileum and the cecum and ascending colon. So taking a closer look at the mucosa, we can see that there are also these shallow longitudinal ulcers, and at the same time there are these pseudopolyps of regenerating mucosa in between. One of the important differential diagnoses would be that of polyposis coli, but usually we do not get these very characteristic shallow ulcers. And in terms of differentiating ulcerative colitis from Crohn's disease, there are several features. Ulcerative colitis tends to affect the colon more frequently, and particularly the left-sided colon. In contrast, in Crohn's disease, the ileocecal region is often favored, but it can also affect the colon alone in a smaller proportion of cases. In ulcerative colitis, usually the ulcers and the abnormal area diffusely involves the colonic mucosa, whereas in Crohn's disease you get some normal areas in between. The ulcers themselves are usually more superficial. In ulcerative colitis, they don't tend to go beyond the submucosa, and the presence of pseudopolyps is often quite striking. And the microscopic features can be quite similar, except for the depth of the ulcers. The more prominent pseudopolyps in ulcerative colitis, and the general absence of well-formed granulomas in ulcerative colitis, but we see them in Crohn's disease. Therefore, in summary, here is an example of a specimen of a colon showing very abnormal mucosal features, including longitudinal shallow ulcers and numerous pseudopolyps due to mucosal regeneration in the intervening mucosa. Similarly, in this case, we can see that the ulcers are fairly shallow and there's abnormal intervening hyperplastic regenerative mucosa in these regions, and also we can see the pseudopolyps here.